Hi, this is Joshua Wilson, and jeez. Hi, this is Hi, this is Joshua Wilson, and my group is composed of Clayton Burrows and Chern He, and our chapter is chapter 3 in the Leibowitz book on frontiers of big data business analytics, patterns and cases in online marketing. Basically, this chapter talks about how the computer technologies are really changing our worlds and our lives at a very accelerating speed. Hi, I'm Joshua Wilson, and my group is composed of Clayton Burrows and Chern He, and we'll be covering Chapter 3 in the J. Leibowitz book, Big Data and Business Analytics. Our chapter is Frontiers of Big Data, Business Analytics, and Patterns and Cases in Online Marketing. Basically, the chapter talks about how the fact that computer technologies and processing are really changing our lives at a very increasing speed. He gives the example of how we've accumulated more data through just a few years ago than we had in the entire history of mankind, and now that's doubling at a rate of less than 2 years, and I think that's actually been updated to say less than 18 months to today. But there's more ways than ever to collect data. Hi, today we'll be covering the Chapter 3 in the J. Leibowitz book on frontiers of big data business analytics, patterns and cases in online marketing. And our group is composed of Chern He, Clayton Burrows, and Joshua Wilson. Basically, the chapter really talks about how computer technology is really changing our lives, and it's doing that at a ever increasingly fast. Hi, today we'll be discussing Chapter 3 of the J. Leibowitz book, Frontiers of Big Data Business Analytics, Patterns and Cases in Online Marketing. Our group is composed of Chern He, Clayton Burrows, and myself, Joshua Wilson. The chapter really talks about how computer technology is changing our lives, and it's doing so at an ever increasing rate. For example, he gives the fact that through the dawn of civilization through 2003, the amount of information that was collected can now, by 2010, be collected in just 2 days. So information is being collected at a ridiculous speed, and there's more ways than ever to collect data from processors and microprocessors on your everyday equipment and your phones, and even common things are being automated and be able to track data and create data. So there's new data sources. We also have better ways to analyze that data: computers, statistical tools, and they're increasing in their capability, and they're becoming very cheap. So ultimately, our computing power is going up dramatically. We can store it easier, storage is cheaper, wider bandwidths, lower cost. The problem, of course, is that data is just data. The more that's collected, the more really needs to be analyzed. Without analysis, that data is not actionable. So we end up with a bottleneck with all this data at the point of having data savvy people. And making that data really actionable is the big problem in this chapter, because without people and ways to process this data, we can't get through the end of the funnel and actually grab those business advantages. There's really a few things that computers are especially good at. For example, they have perfect memory, whether it be across time and very intricacies. They can take years, decades, hundreds of years of data, if you get all that, and be able to track it absolutely perfectly instead of having to be exposed to human memory. Also, those intricacies of data, not only can it know that you ate at Chipotle on December 5th, but it can know that you had guacamole that day instead of most days you didn't. So the intricacies give us many, many ways to track. Also, it has an extremely high ability to search. You can really find the needle in the haystack in a tremendous amount of data that could, in reality, take a human analyst years to find if they had to do it without computing power. Computers are able to sort through calculate trade-offs among a huge number of factors that really humans have psychological biases against being able to do that, and have the inability to really focus on the ones that matter. They have an uncanny ability to predict behavior over a large number of people. That's really the basis of many industries, such as marketing and insurance now. They can find repeatable patterns and do so quite easily. And honestly, many insights and predictions, they can figure out what we can and cannot get from the data. Is the data really telling us what we hope to find? And do so with an extreme level of accuracy. Also, it can notice unintentional evidence. For example, someone may tell you the reasons that they make decisions, but actually not really understand they're being influenced by other decisions. For example, if you ask someone why they bought a certain brand of cereal, they would tell you the reasons that they know of, but they may not understand that in their particular town, in their particular zip code, people are more apt to eat that cereal. So they can notice unintentional evidence. They can also scale personalization solutions. And ultimately what we see is with more data is a huge advantage, because with more data we can build better models. And with those better models, of course, the goal is to have better optimization, get better results. But ultimately computers can't do anything. They're limited by the analyst's ability. They can follow bad instructions. They can gather and consider the wrong data, because and essentially they don't have intuition. So the analyst can essentially lead them astray. One bad decision and all of the computer will follow that. And they can't really generally analyze their own cleanliness. So it all comes down to the computer can't really be better than the driver. Ultimately, computers are going to fail when it comes to predicting whether a small sample will have a behavior that's predicted for a population. So, for example, if you have a male who's 40 years old, 70K, single, 620 FICO score, that computer can tell you with great accuracy that about 85% of the time, that guy will be always on time for his payments, versus 15% of the time he's either going to go into default or payment plan. So it's very precise on that. But where he fails, the computer fails, is when you have one guy in front of you. What's his chances? This is all the information we have. What's his chances of being in the 85 or the 15%? And ultimately, that's where computers get confused. That's where they fail, and having a human interaction to really kind of interview and see what else is there, have that intuition, it matters a lot.